A fast-moving object the size of Manhattan is hurtling towards our solar system, and it will make its closest pass to Earth on December 17th. A Harvard astrophysicist believes there's a strong likelihood this is a craft of alien origin, and the implications, obviously, for humanity would be profound.
Sure exactly what it is. Is that what is leading to maybe this theory that some people think that this could be an alien ship?
Well, it's a possibility, and I define the scale where 0 means it's a natural object and 10 means that it's a technological object that poses a potential threat to humanity. And we need to be aware that when objects come into the solar system, that one out of all these objects might be a spacecraft.
For months, astronomers reassured us that 3I Atlas was nothing more than a dazzling passerby, an interstellar tourist that would skim past Mars and fade into the abyss. But the universe rarely plays by the script. And now, James Webb, our sharpest eye on the cosmic stage, has returned data that flips everything upside down. The numbers have shifted, the trajectory has bent, and for the first time, scientists are whispering the phrase no one dared to consider. 3I Atlas might collide with Mars. Yet this isn't only about impact probabilities. It's about deliberate motion, precision maneuvers, pulse-like bursts of gas, behavior more akin to a machine than a mindless rock. The closer we look, the more undeniable it becomes. 3I Atlas isn't drifting. It's steering, fine-tuning, targeting, and Mars stands directly in its crosshairs. Whatever this thing is, it hasn't finished with our solar system, not by a long shot. Let's dive in. Back on July 1st, when it was first discovered, the object looked like any other interstellar wanderer. A streak of light, glowing coma, and staggering velocity. Nearly 87 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, fast enough to cross the Earth-Moon gap in less than 80 minutes. But speed wasn't the shocker, behavior was.
Maybe this object was targeting the inner solar system. It had a goal to visit the inner solar system, in which case that the rocky reservoir is irrelevant. And if you look at the trajectory of this object, indeed it's perfectly aligned with the plane of the planets around the Sun.
Normal comets slow, fragment, or settle as they near the inner system. 3I Atlas did the opposite. It accelerated, subtly but steadily, while its path began tightening like a guided trajectory. Even stranger, its coma, the haze of gas and dust, doubled in brilliance in mere weeks. Spectral readings spiked with ultraviolet energy and CO2 outgassing at levels beyond anything ever catalogued. It was no longer acting like frozen rubble. It looked like a guided missile with intent. And then Webb's deep field sensors picked up something that changed everything. Rhythmic, regular pulses were erupting from the tail, not random sunlight jets, but precise thrusts every 17 minutes like clockwork. A pattern emerges, a signal, a maneuver, a language of motion detected by Webb, Gemini South, and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory as they tracked the object. The numbers began to tell a terrifying tale. A near miss had narrowed into a genuine threat, a revised closest approach of just 1.95 million kilometers to Mars, razor close on a cosmic scale. Even more alarming, simulations show that a tiny velocity change, on the order of 10 meters per second, or a small fraction of the measured pulse forces, could alter the trajectory enough to turn a miss into a strike. Imagine that, a whisper of thrust, and Mars shifts to ground zero. Such controlled adjustments are unheard of for natural bodies. It's as if 3I Atlas is using its own outgassing as micro-thrusters, steering like a spacecraft, and those pulses align precisely with Mars's orbital plane, not random ejections. Scientists have stopped merely cataloging observations. They are studying intent. The impact window tightens between September 19th and 30th. Any single outburst could push it past the threshold. And this alarm is no longer the realm of amateurs or sci-fi blogs. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb and his team published a paper proposing something bold. 3I Atlas may be an engineered probe. The empirical case is mounting. Radar returns from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Goldstone show metallic-like echoes, unlike the diffuse, watery signatures of comets. Inside sources at NASA say the radar reflections are unprecedented. Combine that with amateur long-exposure images showing green, needle-like streams, 3 glowing beams converging toward Mars in sync with the exhaust pulses, and the picture becomes stark. This object is not behaving like anything natural we've cataloged. Loeb has floated a chilling scenario. 3I Atlas may not just be drifting toward Mars, it could be deliberately targeting it. Whether to crash, to deliver probes, signals, or even spores, the trajectory reeks of surgical precision. Humanity is left as mere spectators, watching an operation unfold across the solar system that we barely comprehend. And what if it truly strikes? The numbers are staggering. With an estimated mass of 10 billion tons, hurtling at 57 kilometers per second relative to Mars, the impact would unleash over 2 million megatons of energy, thousands of times greater than the most powerful nuclear blast in Earth's history. The result? A 60-kilometer wide, 5-kilometer deep crater carved into the Martian surface, ejecting debris across orbit, some of it possibly flung into interplanetary space, even toward Earth. But shattered rock is just the beginning. Mars is host to decades of delicate scientific investments, rovers crawling the surface, orbiters mapping its climate, instruments sniffing for traces of life. An impact wouldn't just smash machines, it would erase a generation of discovery, blind our orbital eyes, and trigger contamination risks we've never prepared for. In response, ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, and JAXA have all convened planetary defense discussions, not against alien fleets, but against one rogue object acting too much like a vehicle. The irony is chilling. For years, we've wondered if Mars once fostered life, or still shelters it, hidden in underground lakes, microbial fossils, or frozen biospheres beneath permafrost. That mystery is why we've sent so many explorers. But if a 3I Atlas slams into the planet, those secrets could be cracked wide open. The unimaginable heat of impact wouldn't just vaporize surface layers, it would fracture the crust, exposing reservoirs untouched by science. And if 3I Atlas carries organic payloads, or worse, engineered biology woven into its exhaust trails, the collision could merge alien chemistry with Martian ecosystems, sparking contamination on a planetary scale. Some biologists call it reverse panspermia, not life spilling from Mars to Earth, but life deliberately seeded into Mars. That flips the whole script. What if the object's purpose isn't annihilation at all, but delivery? What if 3I Atlas is a courier, and Mars the incubator for whatever it carries? Humanity now watches a surgical approach we poorly understand, stunned by the implications. As 3I Atlas closed in, the James Webb telescope trained on it for one last ultra-deep sweep. The raw scan stayed classified for 48 hours before a fragment was released. But leaks from inside Webb hint at a darker truth. Webb's Beck and Miri instruments detected traces of synthetic polymers, molecules eerily like Earth-made plastics, and carbon nanotubes woven into natural gases. These are not materials forged by vacuum chemistry or simple thermal processing. They read as engineered. Spectrographs also flagged persistent isotopic oddities, strange carbon and hydrogen ratios that match nothing known in our solar system. In short, 3I Atlas contains matter that shouldn't exist in deep space, and it's barreling toward a world that might still harbor life. This is a cosmic find with dire biosafety implications. Webb's private dataset was shared with major space agencies, and emergency task forces were scrambled, not because we could necessarily stop the object, but because time to understand it was evaporating. Then something chilling happened. The public channels fell silent. Routine press briefings stopped. Telemetry feeds from Perseverance and Twen-1 showed unexplained gaps. Questions about impact scenarios were redirected and censored. Finally, a classified transmission, later leaked by an internal whistleblower, contained 4 cold words: Impact Protocol Initiated. What does that mean? Nobody can say with certainty, but insiders allege encrypted commands were broadcast from Earth to every functioning asset around Mars. A planetary-scale mystery just turned into a locked box emergency. Curious, there's no known method to deflect or intercept such an object. Unless, of course, those Earth-sent signals weren't defensive at all, but preparatory. What if 3I Atlas isn't being guarded against, but being groomed? If it's even semi-autonomous or intelligent, it could be keyed to energy signatures, orbital beacons, or encoded pulses, signals we might have just flipped on, thereby confirming not just that we're listening, but that we are answering. a small team of cryptographers at the SETI Institute did something nobody else had dared. They converted the public trajectory data, time of closest approach, velocity, and gravitational vectors into binary, then ran the same compression and encoding tools used for deep space messaging. They treated motion as a data stream and then compressed it to see if any pattern would resolve. What emerged was structure, not randomness. The output repeated with startling regularity and contained numerical intervals that map cleanly to atomic numbers: 6, 8, 14, 26, carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron, the elemental backbone of life and machines. Interleaved with those markers were prime number countdowns and recursive spacings consistent with engineered messaging protocols, as if someone had layered metadata on top of physics itself. If that reading holds, the entire flight path of 3I Atlas is a message in motion, not merely a trajectory. Timing, pulses, and presence become a new medium of communication. Impact would be one sentence, a miss another. Every micro-adjustment is a glyph, and an outside intelligence watching could be parsing grammar as we watch the punctuation unfold. As the projected corridor tightened, planetary scientists noticed a chilling coincidence. 3I Atlas's updated track slices a narrow strip that passes directly over Elysium. That alignment could be cosmic chance, or a precise punctuation mark in a communicative event waiting to be decoded. Pia, a geologically young region of Mars, has long been a study in symmetry and strange order, with concentric ridges and spiral flows that eerily echo Fibonacci geometry. Satellite imagery shows patterns so precise they look almost intentional, and the chilling part is this. The descent vector of 3I Atlas aligns dead center with a circular depression just under 3.5 kilometers across, with no impact scars or volcanic trace to explain it. At that basin's heart sits an unusual deposit of crystalline silicates with refractive properties unknown elsewhere on Mars. When struck by solar radiation, these crystals pulse faint bursts of infrared in steady intervals, a geological oddity to some but a potential beacon to others. Might this feature be a rendezvous marker? And if so, who set the coordinates? As James Webb swung back to retrack 3I Atlas, teams spotted a second anomaly trailing behind the main body, not attached, but holding a consistent 0.07 astronomical unit gap. It wasn't debris or gas. Radar saw nothing. Infrared registered no heat, yet photometry recorded a clean, repeating shadow that moved in perfect sync with the object, as if tethered by an invisible hand. That shadow kept exact spacing despite accelerations and gravity changes, and when plotted in polar coordinates, it traced a flawless orbital arc. Something was mirroring 3I Atlas. Neither escort nor wreckage, but a follower, a dark companion that refused to show itself fully. Speculation exploded. A drone, a gravitational echo, a field, a stored memory, or a protocol in waiting. For the first time, scientists began to ask a new question. What if 3I Atlas is not the primary actor, but merely a carrier? A courier for a subtler, more elusive payload? This transforms the scenario from impact risk into a potential rendezvous, and a stellar reveal that changes everything. With every observatory fixed on the approach, a stranger pattern emerged when researchers mapped 3I Atlas's entire route and its closest brushes with the Sun, Earth, and Mars. Each critical alignment landed on astronomical resonance dates, key orbital harmonics humans have tracked for millennia. September 23rd, October 5th, November 11th. These dates aren't mere calendar markers. They match rare gravitational synchronizations that recur on roughly 54-year cycles. In fact, the last time the inner planets lined up in a similar configuration during a cometary passage was the Tunguska event in 1908, a historical echo that sent a chill through the community. Scientists faced a blunt question. How does an apparently random interstellar arrival hit such astronomically significant moments? Unless it isn't random, unless it's timing itself like a cosmic clockwork, not an accident of orbital mechanics. Patterns in space rarely appear by chance. When they do, they often look like design. Then one revelation nudged the conversation into territory once treated as taboo: consciousness in motion. A neurocosmology team at Princeton studying brainwave synchronization during deep meditative states observed something astonishing when subjects were exposed to 3 Atlas's light curve pulsations, especially the 17-minute gas vent intervals, their neural activity synchronized across separate rooms and isolated groups. This went beyond simple resonance. It resembled neurological entrainment, as if the pulsations carried cognitive influence and not merely mechanical rhythm. If a remote object's timing can subtly align human brain states over vast distances, what does that imply about its origin or its intent? Could 3I Atlas be neither mere rock nor conventional spacecraft, but a moving locus of information, a seed of awareness that communicates by motion and timing rather than words? If so, an impact on Mars might be only the physical punctuation of a far larger communicative event. The real event may not be happening in the skies at all, but inside us. As global anxiety swelled over a potential impact, a quiet band of archaeoastronomers began cross-referencing 3I Atlas's trajectory with ancient sky maps, not just Western records, but Babylonian tablets, Mayan codices, and Tibetan cosmology scrolls. What they uncovered defied belief. A recurring motif called the flame serpent, described across cultures as a celestial body plunging from the outer dark, curling unnaturally close to the sun, then striking toward the red god, Mars. The image appears in stelae, carvings, and even primitive cave etchings, each echoing the same serpentine descent. But one artifact stood apart, a pre-Incan calendar stone from Anico showing 4 radiant lines emanating from Mars after a comet's fall. When modern researchers applied photogrammetry to that stone, the lines matched Webb's projected debris dispersion arcs in the event of a Martian impact, down to uncanny precision. This suggests that 3I Atlas is not simply passing through our timeline, it may be repeating one. Mars might not even be the target, but the trigger for a cycle older than civilization itself. Then, as if on cue, something startling occurred. ESA's ExoMars, trace gas orbiter dormant for days to conserve power, picked up a sharp spike in xenon isotopes high in Mars's atmosphere. At first dismissed as solar activity, the isotopic fingerprint told a different story. It was rising not from space above, but from fractures below the Martian crust. The hotspot? Cerberus Fossae, one of the planet's most restless geological regions. Instruments recorded sudden seismic jolts and a subsurface temperature jump of 3 Kelvin. It was as though something beneath Mars had stirred, and 3I Atlas's looming arrival was pulling the trigger on forces long dormant beneath the red world's skin. In stunned silence, magnetometers picked up a weak but unmistakably structured magnetic pulse, one that repeated every 17 minutes, matching 3I Atlas's gas emissions exactly. This flipped the framing. It was no longer just whether the object would impact, it was whether Mars was already answering back. It felt less like a threat and more like activation. Something locked in the crust, dormant for millennia, was beginning to stir with every passing hour. Impact started to read as a temporal event rather than purely kinetic, as Webb's light curves stopped matching simple cometary spin and instead traced a nested timing code. 7 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, 13 pulses, and onward. Those numbers weren't random when plotted. They folded into a Fibonacci-based spiral, an arrangement linked to organic growth, memory encoding, and even DNA coiling. So mathematicians and cryptographers joined forces and arrived at a disturbing conclusion. 3I Atlas appears to be transmitting time, not in seconds or hours, but in cycles and resonances. The object wasn't merely arriving, it was synchronizing. The countdown turned out not to be a timer to impact, but a meter toward resonance, a convergence of energy, orbit, and possibly consciousness. If that sequence completes, the result might not be an explosion, but a shift, a change in perception, or even in the basic framework of what we measure as reality. Then, in the final 72 hours before the projected event, a low-frequency infrasonic signal showed up, inaudible to humans but unmistakable in waveform, and it wasn't coming from space or bouncing off Mars. It was originating from under Olympus Mons, seething up from the largest volcano in the solar system. That synchronous subterranean reply matched 3I Atlas's timing and pushed the mystery from when into the far more terrifying question: what next? This region, long assumed geologically silent, suddenly began emitting a harmonic frequency so structured it was captured independently by ESA, CNSA, and NASA orbiters. The waveform matched no known natural process, but when isolated and rendered as a spectrogram, it revealed a spiral, an uncanny mirror of the very signal streaming from 3I Atlas. As the object skimmed past its closest point to the Sun, the scientific community froze. What does it mean when a planet responds before the intruder even arrives? Is Olympus Mons echoing like a resonant chamber, or transmitting like a beacon? Has Mars been waiting for this rendezvous all along? And more unsettling still, if this is Mars awakening, what happens when it finally opens its eyes? In those tense final hours, a forgotten clue surfaced from dusty archives, an old Mars Odyssey thermal scan nearly 20 years old, dismissed back then as noise. The scan had shown a faint heat bloom beneath Utopia Planitia. Rescanning during 3I Atlas's approach revealed the heat signature had not only persisted, it had expanded, and its contours now matched an ancient glyph etched into the stone walls of the nearby Deuteronomus Mensae Foci. That glyph, nearly invisible to the naked eye, depicted a descending spiral striking a circle, flanked by 2 planetary orbs aligned at the instant of contact. A cosmic storyboard carved into Martian rock. The implications shook researchers. Mars might not be just a planet, but a recording device, storing a memory of celestial cycles, and 3I Atlas the key that unlocks playback. Then came the impossible. High-resolution imagery from ESA's Mars Express captured movement in the dust south of Noctis Labyrinthus. Not rover tracks, not wind. Something beneath the sands was rising, sculpting the grains into deliberate geometry, as though the planet itself were sketching in response. 2 perfect concentric ovals bloomed on the surface, expanding outward as if something carved them from beneath. Over 4 hours, the rings stretched and shifted, resolving into a single, unmistakable glyph. An eye tilted precisely 23.5 degrees, the same tilt as Earth's axial tilt, an impossible symmetry that read like a mirror turned back at us. Scientists scrambled for answers, but none fit the evidence. Mars had literally blinked. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but physically and with intent. Something under the crust was not only active, but aware of our geometry, our orientation, and most disturbingly of our signal, as if this rendezvous had been expected long before our species ever existed. In one of the last readings before the signal blackout, the James Webb Space Telescope performed a spectral breakdown of the molecular trail left by 3I Atlas. Buried in the volatile organics and carbon chains was a repeating strand of nucleo-like sequences, eerily similar to RNA, not identical to Earth biochemistry, but unmistakably structured for replication. This wasn't merely biological noise, it was responsive. As teams mapped the strand, portions echoed human-designed encryption keys while others matched known musical intervals, as if the molecule itself carried grammar meant to interact with intelligence. This was no passive cosmic dust. It was a living code engineered to transmit across space. Life delivered not as cells, but as language. If that interpretation holds, the stakes shift dramatically. Mars may be a node in a galactic archive, and 3I Atlas the playback key. The ripple effects for astrobiology, planetary protection, and our definition of life are seismic and utterly game-changing. As 3I Atlas swung into its final arc, the Global Astronomy Network assembled one last precise map. For a fleeting instant, Mars, Earth, and the Sun would form a dead straight line, and 3I Atlas would cross that axis at the exact moment of solar transit. This wasn't sloppy orbital luck, it felt like choreography. The projected geometry matched ancient megalithic sightlines across our world: Stonehenge, Newgrange, Yat Tati, Wakan, monuments tuned to the same triad of celestial angles. For millennia, people unknowingly built monuments that point to this configuration, and now the cosmic arrangement was repeating itself, not as story, but as mechanism. Mars as the red witness, Earth as the awakened observer, the Sun as the eternal source, and 3I Atlas as the keystone sliding into the planetary lock. This final placement wasn't about wreckage, it was about completion and initiation. Once that keystone fell into place, something fundamental would shift. Not out there, but in here. We had looked up and labeled it a comet, a rogue fragment from the galaxy's dark corners, and we kept score: trajectory, velocity, arc, convincing ourselves of randomness. But James Webb's readings overturned that comfort. what we'd called chants bore signatures of ritual, alignment, reply, and timed response across worlds. This object didn't merely arrive, it performed. As 3I Atlas traversed the inner system, every planet began to whisper back signals, pulses, alignments, codes, until Mars did more than react. It remembered. The evidence read like a script written into planetary bones, a replay of an ancient act. The dust, the gravity pulses, the timing, and now, with one calibrated maneuver, 3I Atlas has parked itself not to annihilate, but to complete a pattern, a countdown, a convergence, a cosmic protocol. Mars may be the stage, but Earth, we are not passive onlookers. We are part of the design, woven into the choreography of worlds and the stellar reveal that has only just begun. Every instrument we forged, every broadcast we pushed into the void, every skeptical laugh, somewhere it was all received. The final event might not carve a crater or send a fireball across the sky, but it has already started to remap what we believed about Mars, about life, and about who we are. In the end, 3I Atlas didn't come from our neighborhood. It came for our attention. Now that it has our gaze, the real question is what comes next. If you want to follow every discovery, like this video and subscribe to Deep Orbit. Turn on notifications because the next chapter won't be televised. Share this with someone who still believes we're alone, and leave a comment below. Do you think 3I Atlas was an accident or an invitation? Maybe, just maybe, Mars isn't the one being struck. Perhaps it's our certainty that's being shattered, and the truth has already landed among us.